June 12, 1944. Carentan, France. 08:20 hours Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, 37, commander of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, watched American infantry advance through bocage hedgerows with coordination that seemed impossible. His own companies, scattered across 3 kilometers, communicated through runners carrying written messages. Response time to changing situations measured in hours. The Americans responded in minutes. Their companies moved like fingers on a hand, each aware of the others, adjusting instantly to threats his isolated German units couldn't counter. Von der Heydte had fought in Crete, Russia, and Italy. He'd commanded elite paratroopers against the best Allied forces, but he'd never faced an enemy with this level of tactical coordination at the small unit level. The reason wasn't better soldiers or superior tactics. The reason was a 38-pound backpack radio called the SCR-300 and a handheld unit called the SCR-536 that let squad leaders talk to each other like they were standing face to face. What happened in Normandy that summer would convince German commanders that tactical communication superiority had become as decisive as air superiority and just as impossible for Germany to match. By June 1944, military communications technology had evolved dramatically since the war began. But the evolution was uneven. Some armies embraced radio communications at every level. Others relied on traditional methods that had served for centuries. The gap between those approaches determined who controlled modern battlefields. German communications doctrine emphasized centralized control through established chains of command. Army headquarters communicated with division headquarters via landline telephone networks or long-range radio. Divisions communicated with regiments, regiments with battalions. But below battalion level, communications became increasingly primitive. Company commanders sent runners. Platoon leaders used signal flags or shouted orders. Squad leaders pointed and gestured. This hierarchical approach worked well in static defensive warfare, where units held established positions connected by field telephone lines. It worked adequately in mobile operations when divisions advanced or withdrew as cohesive formations following predetermined plans. It broke down completely in fluid, rapidly changing engagements where small units needed to coordinate independently without waiting for orders from above. The German military possessed radio equipment. The Tornfew B-1 backpack radio equipped some battalion and company headquarters. The Feldfew vehicle-mounted radio served armored and mechanized units. But these radios were relatively scarce, fairly heavy, somewhat unreliable, and primarily used for communication up and down the chain of command, rather than laterally between units. More critically, German tactical doctrine didn't emphasize radio communications at the small unit level. Junior officers were trained to follow orders from above and execute their portion of the overall plan. Initiative was encouraged within defined parameters, but independent action by small units coordinating laterally with other small units wasn't standard practice. American communications doctrine had evolved differently. The U.S. Army embraced radio communications as fundamental to modern warfare. By 1944, American infantry companies had multiple radios as standard equipment. The SCR-300 backpack radio, developed by Motorola and fielded from 1943 onward, gave company commanders direct voice communication, with battalion headquarters and with other companies at ranges, up to 3 miles in good conditions, more. Revolutionary was the SCR-536 handheld radio, nicknamed the Handie-Talkie. Weighing just 5 pounds, operating on a single frequency, with range limited to about half a mile. The SCR-536 allowed platoon leaders and even squad leaders to communicate directly with each other and with their company commander. For the first time in military history, tactical leaders at the lowest levels could coordinate their actions in real time without runners, without shouted orders, without visual signals. The tactical implications were profound. An American infantry company attacking through hedgerows could coordinate 3 or 4 platoons simultaneously. When one platoon encountered resistance, the company commander knew immediately. He could redirect other platoons to flank the resistance without waiting for runners to arrive, report, receive new orders, and return. The entire process that took German units 30 to 45 minutes took American units 3 to 5 minutes. The difference multiplied across entire battalions and regiments. An American battalion commander with radio contact to all his companies could shift forces, concentrate firepower, exploit opportunities with speed German commanders couldn't match. When Germans finally understood what was happening and attempted response, American units had already moved to new positions. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole, commander of the 3rd Battalion, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, demonstrated this advantage on June 11, 1944, during the assault on Carentan. His battalion attacked German positions defended by von der Heydte's paratroopers across open fields offering no concealment. The attack stalled under heavy fire. Cole's companies were pinned down, taking casualties, unable to advance or withdraw effectively. Cole used his SCR-300 to coordinate with all 4 company commanders simultaneously. While maintaining suppressive fire from 2 companies, he directed his other 2 companies to shift 200 yards left, assault a less heavily defended section, and roll up the German flank. The entire maneuver took 12 minutes from Cole's initial radio call to successful penetration of German lines. Von der Heydte's regiment, lacking radio communications between companies, couldn't respond in time. By the time German runners reported the American flanking movement and carried orders to respond, Cole's paratroopers had penetrated too deeply to contain. Von der Heydte's after-action report, recovered from German archives after the war, noted this engagement with professional frustration. American coordination at the small unit level exceeded our capability to respond. Their company commanders exercised control comparable to our battalion commanders. Their battalion commanders exercised control comparable to our regimental commanders. This disparity in command and control created tactical advantages we could not overcome through superior positions or fighting skill. The SCR-300 radio worked remarkably well given the technology available in 1943. It operated on FM frequencies between 40 and 48 MHz, offering 40 selectable channels. This allowed multiple units to operate radios simultaneously without interfering with each other, critical for coordination. The receiver was super heterodyne design, relatively resistant to interference. The transmitter produced 4 watts of power, enough for 3-mile range in good conditions, 1 mile reliably even in difficult terrain. The entire unit weighed 38 pounds including batteries. The BA-70 battery pack provided 20 to 25 hours of operation. Soldiers could carry and operate the SCR-300 while moving, though typically one soldier in the company headquarters section was designated as radio operator. The radio operator became one of the most important soldiers in the company, responsible for maintaining the commander's lifeline to higher headquarters and subordinate units. The SCR-536 handheld radio was less sophisticated, but more revolutionary in impact. Operating on a single frequency in the 3.5 to 6 MHz band, the SCR-536 had limited range and no channel selection, but it was small, lightweight, and simple to operate. Platoon leaders could carry it without burden. By mid-1944, some infantry companies had SCR-536 radios for every platoon, leader and some squad leaders. The tactical advantage of squad leaders communicating directly with their platoon leader and with each other cannot be overstated. German squads were isolated once combat began. They executed their portion of the plan based on last received orders. If situations changed, squad leaders made independent decisions without coordination. Often these decisions were excellent. German NCOs were well-trained and experienced. But even excellent independent decisions by isolated units are less effective than good coordinated decisions by connected units. American squad leaders using SCR-536 radios could coordinate with adjacent squads instantly. We're held up by machine gun in the stone house. Need suppressive fire from your position while we flank left. 30 seconds of radio communication. Replace 10 minutes of runner time or simply not communicating at all and hoping adjacent units figured out what was needed. German commanders recognized American communication superiority fairly quickly. Reports from Normandy in late June 1944 noted that American units demonstrated unusual coordination and rapid response to changing situations. Initial German analysis attributed this to superior training or better reconnaissance. By July, captured American radios and interrogated prisoners revealed the real explanation. A Wehrmacht intelligence report dated July 18, 1944, analyzed American tactical communications. The report, recovered from German archives, was remarkably accurate. It described the SCR-300 and SCR-536 in detail, noted their capabilities and limitations, and assessed their tactical impact. American infantry units demonstrate communications capabilities at the company and platoon level that exceed German capabilities at the battalion and company level. This disparity allows American commanders to exercise positive control over subordinate units during fluid combat situations where our commanders lose contact and must rely on subordinate initiative. American tactical doctrine exploits this communications advantage through emphasis on coordinated maneuver and concentrated firepower from multiple units simultaneously. We have observed American company commanders directing 4 separate elements in real time during engagements, something our regimental commanders cannot accomplish without prepared telephone networks. The report recommended immediate development and fielding of comparable equipment for German forces. The recommendation went nowhere. Germany lacked the industrial capacity to produce radios in required quantities. More critically, German tactical doctrine would have required fundamental revision to exploit small unit radio communications effectively. Doctrine changes require time, training, and cultural acceptance. Germany had none of these resources in mid-1944. Some German units attempted improvised solutions. Captured American radios were used when batteries and replacement parts could be obtained. Some Wehrmacht signal units manufactured small numbers of simplified radios based on captured American examples. But these efforts were scattered, local, inadequate to systematic need. By late 1944, perhaps 1 in 20 German infantry companies had any radio capability below battalion level. American companies all had multiple radios as standard equipment. The impact extended beyond infantry operations. American artillery forward observers used SCR-300 radios to call fire support directly from company commander positions. German forward observers typically operated with battalion headquarters, requiring company commanders to request fire support through runners to battalion, introducing delays that reduced artillery effectiveness. American artillery could respond to targets within 2 to 3 minutes of identification. German artillery response time was typically 15 to 20 minutes. In fluid combat, targets moved or opportunities passed in those extra minutes. American armor and mechanized units also benefited from radio superiority. Tank platoons could coordinate with infantry platoons directly. Tank destroyer units could respond to armor threats reported by infantry in minutes, rather than routing requests through multiple headquarters layers. This integration of arms at the tactical level gave American combined arms teams flexibility German combined arms formations couldn't match. The human experience of fighting with or without tactical radios shaped how soldiers viewed combat. Staff Sergeant John McNeice, squad leader in the 29th Infantry Division, described radio communications impact in a 1990 interview. Before we got handheld radios in late '44, I felt isolated once we moved out on attack. I could see maybe 50 yards through bocage or forest. I knew other squads were somewhere nearby but couldn't see them, couldn't talk to them. When we hit resistance, I made my best guess what to do, and hoped other squads were doing something compatible. After we got SCR-536 radios, everything changed. I could talk to my platoon leader, tell him exactly what I saw, hear what other squads encountered, coordinate our movements. We stopped being isolated individuals and became a team. Made us much more effective and honestly made me feel less alone in combat. German soldiers expressed opposite experience. Gefreiter Hans Dietrich, infantryman in the 352nd Infantry Division, was captured in August 1944. His interrogation included questions about communications. His testimony reflected frustration. We advanced according to plan until American fire forced us to ground. My squad leader moved us left toward cover. We had no way to tell our neighboring squad what we were doing. They apparently withdrew, but we didn't know this. We found ourselves isolated, surrounded, with no communication to anyone. We fought as long as ammunition lasted, then surrendered. Later I learned our company commander thought we'd been killed in initial contact. He had no way to know we'd moved or that we needed support. Americans seemed to always know where their people were and what they were doing. We were often just guessing. The communications disparity created a feedback loop that compounded German disadvantages. American units operating with effective communications could execute more complex tactics. Success with complex tactics led to doctrine emphasizing coordination and maneuver. Doctrine emphasizing coordination required good communications, which America provided. Each element reinforced the others in a virtuous cycle. German forces lacked communications, which limited tactical options to simpler approaches. Simpler tactics were often effective when German soldiers were well-trained and experienced. But as experienced soldiers were lost and replacements arrived with minimal training, simple tactics without coordination became increasingly ineffective. The lack of tactical communications prevented execution of more sophisticated approaches that might have compensated for declining soldier quality. By 1945, the disparity was insurmountable. American forces routinely coordinated battalion-size operations involving infantry, armor, artillery, and air support, with timing measured in minutes. German forces attempted similar coordination, but timing measured in hours, by which time battlefield situations had changed. American commanders made decisions based on current information received via radio. German commanders made decisions based on information 30 minutes old carried by runners, and their orders took another 30 minutes to reach subordinate units. After the war, German officers studied American tactical communications extensively. The lessons influenced post-war German military development significantly. The Bundeswehr, formed in 1955, emphasized tactical communications at all levels from its inception. Every squad leader had a radio. Every vehicle had a radio. The doctrine assumed constant communication and was built around exploiting that capability. General Major Günther Pape, who served as a Wehrmacht company commander in Normandy and later joined the Bundeswehr, wrote in 1968 about tactical communications impact. In Normandy, I commanded 180 men whom I could barely communicate with once combat began. I knew generally where my platoons were, but had limited detailed information about what they encountered or needed. My American counterparts commanded 180 men with whom they maintained constant contact. They knew exactly where everyone was, what resistance they faced, what support they needed. This information superiority translated directly to tactical superiority. After the war, when I helped develop Bundeswehr doctrine, my first priority was ensuring never again would German commanders fight without tactical communications. We learned the lesson America taught us in 1944, painfully but thoroughly. The SCR-300 and SCR-536 were not technologically miraculous devices. Contemporary radio technology could have produced similar equipment for any major military. The British developed comparable tactical radios. The Soviets fielded radio equipment extensively. What distinguished American implementation was the systematic distribution of radios to small units and the doctrine developed to exploit them. Today, tactical communications are so fundamental to military operations that their absence is unthinkable. Every soldier carries a radio. Squad leaders, platoon leaders, company commanders, battalion commanders all operate in a networked communications environment that would astonish World War II soldiers. The conceptual foundation for this networked warfare was laid in 1944, when American infantry discovered that small unit radio communications created tactical advantages, decisive enough to compensate for many other disadvantages. At the Army Signal Corps Museum at Fort Gordon, Georgia, an SCR-300 radio and SCR-536 handheld radio are displayed with information explaining their impact on World War II operations. Veterans visiting the museum often pause at this display. reflecting on how these relatively simple devices changed warfare fundamentally. A comment in the museum guest book from 2017, written by a retired Army colonel, captured the significance well. My grandfather carried an SCR-300 in Normandy. He said it weighed 38 pounds and the batteries died at inconvenient times, and reception was sometimes poor. But he also said it was worth more than 2 extra rifle squads because it let his company fight as a coordinated team instead of 4 isolated platoons. Today I carry a radio that weighs 8 ounces, has global range, and includes GPS and data transmission. But the fundamental advantage is the same my grandfather had. Coordinated units beat isolated units regardless of individual skill. Communications enable coordination. That lesson hasn't changed in 80 years and won't change in the next 80. That observation extends beyond military contexts. Any organization trying to accomplish complex tasks under pressure needs effective communications. Teams that can coordinate rapidly and adjust to changing conditions outperform teams of individually talented people operating in isolation. This seems obvious now. It wasn't obvious in 1944. Many military organizations, including the German Wehrmacht, believed that well-trained soldiers following good plans didn't need elaborate communications. The plans would work, and soldiers would execute them. But plans rarely survive contact with reality unchanged. Situations change, opportunities appear, threats emerge. Organizations that can recognize changes, communicate them rapidly, and adjust coordinated responses gain enormous advantages over organizations where individuals must recognize, decide, and act independently. The Germans had excellent soldiers, proven tactics, and experienced leaders. They fought in isolation, each unit executing its portion of the plan without lateral coordination. The Americans had adequate soldiers, evolving tactics, and leaders learning on the job. They fought as networked teams, constantly adjusting to what neighbors reported and commander directed. Network beat individual, communication beat isolation. In 1944, that difference was measured in the weight of a backpack radio and the doctrine that made it valuable. Today, the technology is vastly better, but the principle remains exactly the same. Connect your people. Let them coordinate. Give them communications tools and doctrine to exploit them. Do that, and you'll beat opponents who don't, regardless of what other advantages they possess. The SCR-300 and SCR-536 weren't secret weapons. Germans captured them, analyzed them, understood them. But understanding isn't implementing. Knowing isn't doing. By the time German commanders recognized how decisive tactical communications had become, they lacked the time and resources to match American capabilities. Sometimes the winner isn't who has the best equipment first. Sometimes the winner is who has adequate equipment for everyone and doctrine that maximizes its value. America didn't invent radio. America didn't even make the best radios. America gave radios to everyone who needed them and built tactical doctrine around that capability. That was enough. That made all the difference. That's still the lesson.